Hello. Today I'm reading from Sources for America's History, edited by Kevin Sheets. This reading is called Advocating Cultural Pluralism, written by Horace Callan. Many old stock Americans assumed that the ethnic and cultural diversity of the new immigrants flooding the country's ports would quickly disappear as they merged into the melting pot of American society. However, evidence from their persisting ethnic identity in food, ways, language, religious practices, and customs alarmed those Americans who questioned the immigrants' loyalties and fit. By contrast, philosopher Horace Callan, born to Jewish parents in Germany but raised from childhood in the United States, offered an alternative to the melting pot ideal. At the present time, there is no dominant American mind. Our spirit is inarticulate, not a voice, but a chorus of many voices, each singing a rather different tune. How to get order out of this cacophony is the question for all those who are concerned about those things which alone justify wealth and power, concerned about justice, arts, literature, philosophy, and science. What shall this cacophony become? A unison or a harmony? For decidedly the older America, whose voice and whose spirit was New England, is gone beyond recall. Americans are still the artists and thinkers of the land, but they work, each for himself, without common vision or ideals. The older tradition has passed from life into a memory, and a newer one, so far as it has an Anglo-Saxon base, is holding its own beside more fundamental rivals, the expression in appropriate form of the national inheritance of various populations concentrated in various states of the Union, populations of whom their national self-consciousness is perhaps chief spiritual asset. Think of the Creoles in the South and the French Canadians in the North, clinging to the French for so many generations and maintaining, however weakly, spiritual and social contact with the mother country. Of the Germans with their Deutschland, their Münnerschor, their Turnverne, and Schützenfest. Of the universally separated Jews, of the intensely nationalistic Irish, of the Pennsylvania Germans, of the indomitable Poles, and even more indomitable Bohemians, of the 30,000 Belgians in Wisconsin, and their Belgian language, a mixture of Walloon and Flemish, welded by reaction to a strange social environment. Except in such cases as the town of Lead, South Dakota, the great ethnic groups of proletarians thrown upon themselves in a new environment generate from among themselves the other social classes which Mr. Ross misses so sadly among them. Their shopkeepers, their physicians, their attorneys, their journalists, and their national and political leaders, who form the links between them and the greater American society. They develop their own literature, or become conscious of that of the mother country. As they grow more prosperous and Americanized, as they become free from the stigma of foreigner, they develop group self-respect. The Wat changes to a proud Italian, the hunky into an intensely nationalistic Slav. They learn or they recall the spiritual heritage of their nationality. Their cultural abjectness gives way to cultural pride, and public schools, the libraries, the clubs become beset with demands for texts in the national language and literature. What is the cultural outcome likely to be under these conditions? Surely not the melting pot. Rather something that has become more distinct in the changing state and city life of the last 2 decades, and which is most articulate and apparent among just those people whom Mr. Ross praises most: the Scandinavians, the Germans, the Irish, the Jews. Immigrants appear to pass through 4 phases in the course of being Americanized. The first phase they exhibit economic interest, eagerness, the greed of the unfed. Since external differences are a handicap in the economic struggle, they assimilate, seeking thus to facilitate the attainment of economic independence. Once the proletarian level of such independence is reached, the process of assimilation slows down and tends to come to a stop. The immigrant group is still a national group, modified, sometimes improved, by the environmental influences, but otherwise a solitary spiritual unit which is seeking to find its way out on its own social level. This search brings to light permanent group distinctions, and the immigrants, like the Anglo-Saxon American, is thrown back upon himself and his ancestry. Then a process of dissimilation begins. The arts, life, and ideals of nationality become central and paramount. Ethnic and national differences change in status from the disadvantages to distinctions. All the while, the immigrant has been using the English language and behaving like an American in matters economic and political, and continues to do so. The institutions of the Republic have become liberating cause and the background for the rise of the cultural consciousness and social autonomy of the immigrant Irishman, German, Scandinavian, Jew, Pole, or Bohemian. On the whole, Americanization has not repressed nationality. Americanization has liberated nationality. Hence, what troubles Mr. Ross and so many other Anglo-Saxon Americans is not really inequality. What troubles them is difference. The only things that are alike, in fact, and not abstractly, and only men that are alike in origin and spirit and not abstractly, can truly equal and maintain inward unanimity of action and outlook, which makes a national life. The writers of the Declaration of Independence and of the Constitution were not confronted by the practical fact of ethnic dissimilarity among the whites of the country. Their descendants are confronted with it. Its existence, acceptance, and development provide one of the inevitable consequences of the democratic principle on which our theory of governance is based. And the result at the present writing is to so many worthies very unpleasant. Democratism and the federal principle have worked together with economic greed and ethnic snobbishness to people the land with all the nationalities of Europe, and to convert the early American nation into the present American state. For in effect, we are in the process of becoming a true federal state, such a state as men hoped for as the outcome of the European War, a great republic consisting of a federation or commonwealth of nationalities. What is inalienable in the life of mankind is its intrinsic positive quality, its psychophysical inheritance. Men may change their clothes, their politics, their wives, their religions, their philosophies, to a greater or lesser extent. They cannot change their grandfathers. Jews or Poles or Anglo-Saxons would have to cease to be. The selfhood, which is inalienable to them, and for the realization of which they require inalienable liberty, is ancestrally determined, and the happiness which they pursue has its form implied in ancestral endowment. This is what actually democracy in operation assumes. There are human capacities which it is the function of the state to liberate and to protect, and the future failure of the state as a government means its abolition. Government, the state, under the democratic conception, is merely an instrument, not an end. That is often abused that it is often an abused instrument, that it is often seized by powers that prey, that it makes frequent mistakes and considers only secondary ends surface needs, which vary from moment to moment, is of course obvious, hence our social and political chaos. But that it is an instrument flexibly adjustable to changing life, changing opinions and needs, our whole electoral organization and party system declare. And as intelligence and wisdom prevail over politics and special interests, as the steady and continuous pressure of the inalienable qualities and purposes of human groups more and more dominate the confusion of our common life, the outlines of a possible great and true democratic commonwealth become discernible. Its form is that of a federal republic, its substance a democracy of nationalities, cooperating voluntarily and autonomously in the enterprise of self-realization through the perfection of men according to their kind. The common language of the Commonwealth, the language of its great political tradition, is English. But each nationality expresses its emotional and voluntary life in its own language, in its own inevitable aesthetic and intellectual forms. The common life of the Commonwealth is political economic and serves as the foundation and background for the realization of the distinct individuality of each natio that composes it. Thus, American civilization may come to mean the perfection of the cooperative harmonies of European civilization, the waste, the squalor, and the distress of Europe being eliminated, a multiplicity in a unity, an orchestration of mankind. As in an orchestra, every type of instrument has its specific timbre and tonality, founded in its substance and form, as every type has its appropriate theme and melody in the whole symphony. So in society, each ethnic group is a natural instrument. Its spirit and culture are its theme and melody. And the harmony and dissonance and discord of them all make the symphony of civilization. With this difference, a musical symphony is written before it is played. In the symphony of civilization, the playing is the writing, so that there is nothing so fixed and inevitable about its progressions as in music, so that within the limits set by nature they may vary at will, and the range and variety of the harmonies may become wider and richer and more beautiful. But the question is, do the dominant classes in America want such a society?